Namaste. Aloha. My name is Janapati Das, and welcome again to another exciting Krishna Katha story. We are going to read about Krishna's daily activities today. But first, as always, let me offer my respects to you, to my spiritual master, and to Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, from which we are reading his translations of the Krishna book from the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. First, of course, as instructed by our spiritual master and by all spiritual masters, including Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we will begin by engaging in kirtan, which is the hearing and chanting of Krishna's holy names. So please join along. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Siddhaswarupananda Varamam Sayitinam Ye Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Siddhaswarupananda Varamam Sayitinam Ye Vaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasudeva Bhakta Vrinda Vaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasudeva Bhakta Vrinda Hari Bol Nita Gaur Nita Gaur Hari Bol Hari Bol Nita Gaur Nita Gaur 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 Nityananda Chaitanya Nityananda Chaitanya Nityananda Chaitanya Nityananda Chaitanya Oh Nityananda Chaitanya Nityananda Chaitanya Nityananda Chaitanya Nityananda Chaitanya Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Gopala Govinda Rama Madana Mohana 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 Madana Mohana Murari Madana Mohana Murari Madana Mohana Murari Haribo 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 Madana Mohana Murari Madana Mohana Murari Madana Mohana Murari Haribo 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 Madana Mohana Murari Madana Mohana Murari Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Haribo, Haribo, Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. All glory is to Sri Krishna. All glory is to Lord Balaram. So if you've been following along in the story and my videos, the last story we just completed was the Narada Muni visiting all the palaces of Lord Sri Krishna. Of course, Narada Muni, the transcendental spaceman, the pure devotee of Krishna, is utilizing his service to Krishna by means of spreading Krishna's names, Krishna's pastimes, Krishna's instructions, and also to facilitate in the pastimes of Krishna. So you can see in the story already, Narada Muni appears so many times to do certain different activities. It's very wonderful. So actually, in this story, he wanted to see the inconceivable potencies of Krishna's internal energy. And by that, if you've watched the story or you read the story, you know that Krishna has 16,108 wives in Dwarka. And each of them has an expansion of Krishna. Krishna is present in every palace of the queen, to specifically only to that queen, what they believe is, Krishna being henpecked, or Krishna's mine, right? He's living his life. And in this story, of course, we saw Narada Muni went and saw how Krishna was facilitating the life of a perfect householder, setting the example, even though he's God, he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, how a perfect householder would live in the Vedic civilization. In this day and age, many of the Vedic traditions are too difficult for Kali Yuga householders to follow, but we can engage in the instruction of our spiritual master, who is in the disciplic lineage to Lord Chaitanya and to Lord Sri Krishna. So he instructs us by the proper way that we can engage in our sadhana bhakti and our service to Krishna as being married and having children. But in the story, of course, Narada Muni saw how Krishna was living the life as a perfect householder, doing all these things, and he was just thought it was so wonderful, but just so wonderful in the sense that even for a great sage like Narada Muni, it's just so inconceivable. So we are continuing on now. You can go back and watch that video if you'd like to, or if you have the Krishna book, I would recommend rereading the story of the Narada Muni visiting Lord Sri Krishna in his palaces. And we are continuing in the last third of the Krishna book, Lord Krishna's daily activities. From the Vedic mantras, we learn that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has nothing to do. Natasya karyam kranam cha vijyate. If the Supreme Lord has nothing to do, then how can we speak of the activities of the Supreme Lord? Right? Very good question, right? We're going to find that out. Krishna is also known as Atmarama, self-sufficient, right? He has no need of anything. Everything is owned and controlled by him. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. From the previous chapter, it is clear that no one can act in the way that Lord Krishna does. It's true. We should clearly note this fact. The activities of the Lord should be followed, but they cannot be imitated. And this is similar not only for Krishna, but also for your spiritual master or devotee. We should never try to imitate our spiritual master, but we should definitely follow in the footsteps of the great acharyas previous to us, our spiritual master's master, and so on and so on. In the disciplic lineage, the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, the lineage of spiritual masters back to Krishna. And we follow in the footsteps because it's not about imitation. It's not about doing exactly what they do, in the sense of, for example, I remember hearing my spiritual teacher talk about how some of his godbrothers would actually wear similar clothes to Bhaktivedanta. Would try to do the mannerisms of Bhaktivedanta, would even speak the way that Bhaktivedanta, gesture the way that Bhaktivedanta did, without really even catching the essence. It's not about imitation, it's about following the instructions of your spiritual master. Your spiritual master never says, get up and do exactly as I do. Don't do, stand this way, speak this way, eat this kind of food because I like to eat it. It's just kind of ridiculous and very ignorant of the fact of what a spiritual master is for. So similarly, Krishna was setting the example that should be followed, not imitated. For example, Krishna's ideal life as a householder can be followed, but if one wants to imitate Krishna by expanding into many forms, that is not possible. This is also a lesson for those so-called gurus who call themselves God or incarnations of God. You can always say, as Bhaktivedanta said, if you wanted to, call out a scoundrel calling himself God, it says, can you pick up a mountain like Krishna? Can you expand yourself into so many forms as Krishna? Can you do the activities that Lord Krishna did? Lifting Govardhan Hill, killing demons. It's like they can't. They just maybe have some kind of simple mystic powers of making things appear from whatever, or even a sleight of hand, or they can give people like Shakti, what they call Shakti charges, which are electrical charges, and people are foolish. The fools like to be led by the fools. So they think, oh, that person shocked me, therefore he must be God. It's so silly. Now, the pure lover of Krishna would never call himself God. It is said that we worship the pure devotee of Krishna as if we were worshiping God, not because he is God, but because he's a representative. He is a pure medium of Lord Sri Krishna. We give him the same respect as Lord Sri Krishna, and we understand, as is laid out by Krishna, that one cannot approach Krishna without the benediction and the mercy of the pure devotee of Krishna. So the spiritual master is very important. We should always follow his instructions. We should follow his footsteps, but we should never try to imitate. We should always remember that Lord Krishna, although playing the part of a human being, nevertheless simultaneously maintains the position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We can follow Lord Krishna's dealings with his wife as an ordinary human being, but his dealing with more than 16,000 wives at one time cannot be imitated, as we already laid out last class. I tried to break that down mathematically about how impossible that would be. You basically would see your wife, each wife maybe twice in your life, something like that. If you tried to visit each wife, it's like you can't simultaneously be with 16,108 wives. I mean, some great leaders have had many wives, maybe even hundreds of wives, but they never were able to simultaneously be with them all at the same time. Right? They were still an individual. Krishna, however, is a different scenario, different situation, different person. He can be with anybody. He can be in consider the inconceivable potency of Lord Sri Krishna. Not only is he in the spiritual world, relating to all the unlimited devotees there simultaneously, but he is also in the material world, in every single cell. He's in every single inch of the universe. He's in the hearts of every living entity in the material universes, not just this universe, but all universes. He's constantly, we are all intimately having an individual relationship with Krishna, but yet he is one person. How do we, we're like, whoa. Our mind cannot grasp that. They cannot We cannot wrap this little finite mind around that kind of concept. As I've said before in my last video, this is the dilemma of the material scientist who, you know, is the atheistic person who says, show me God, how come I don't see God? I don't even have the ability to even understand this material universe, let alone, you know, see God. Maybe it's not because you want to see God, it's because God doesn't want to see you. And really, also deep down, you don't really want to see God either. You want to be God. So this is a whole nother story that we, of course, went through last video. We can follow Krishna's dealings with his wives as an ordinary human being, but his dealing with more than 16,000 wives at one time cannot be imitated. The conclusion is that to become ideal householders, we should follow in the footsteps of Lord Krishna as he displayed his daily activities, but we cannot imitate him at any stage of our life. Lord Krishna used to lie down with his 16,000 wives, but also he would rise up from bed very early in the morning, 3 hours before sunrise. By nature's arrangement, the crowing of the cocks warns of the Brahma Muhurta hour. There is no need of alarm clocks. As soon as the cocks crow early in the morning, it is to be understood that it is time to rise from bed. Hearing that sound, Krishna would get up from bed, but his rising early was not very much to the liking of his wives. They didn't want Krishna to leave, right? But he was following a standard that basically this time, the Brahma Muhurta, is a very auspicious time. It's recommended that we try to rise this early in the morning, take our bath, practice in our meditation activities, chanting Krishna's name, chanting our japa, doing Gauranga breathing, whatever it might be, reading scripture, offering food to the deities at this time. It's a very auspicious time. The wives of Krishna were so much attached to him that they would lie in bed embracing him. But as soon as the cocks crowed, Krishna's wives would be very sorry and would immediately condemn the crowing. In the garden within the compound of each palace, there were parijata flowers. Parijata is not an artificial flower. We remember that Krishna brought the parijata trees from heaven and implanted them in all his palaces. Early in the morning, a mild breeze would carry the aroma of the parijata flower, and Krishna would smell it just after rising from bed. Due to this aroma, the honeybees began their humming vibration, and the birds also would begin their sweet chirping sounds. We have a little sound effects from the birds outside. Altogether, it would sound like the singing of professional chanters, engaged in offering prayers to Krishna. Although Srimati Rukmini Devi, the first queen of Lord Krishna, knew that the Brahma Muhurta is the most auspicious time in the entire day, she would feel disgusted at the appearance of Brahma Muhurta because she was not very happy to have Krishna leave her side in bed. Despite Srimati Rukmini Devi's disgust, Lord Krishna would immediately get up from bed exactly on the appearance of Brahma Muhurta. An ideal householder should learn from the behavior of Lord Krishna how to rise early in the morning, however comfortably he may be lying in bed embraced by his wife. And, you know, you're not Krishna, and your wife is certainly not Rukmini Devi. After rising from bed, Lord Krishna would wash his mouth, hands, and feet and would immediately sit down and meditate on himself. So you got these people that are so-called, you know, even like people who follow the Mayavadi philosophy of yoga. They sometimes will have these altars with a mirror, so they believe that they are God, right? So they're just looking at the reflection of themselves. But it's not beneficial to meditate upon our ugly material form, or even really to meditate upon our spiritual self, although that's an important thing to understand. But also, we should be meditating on Krishna, because Krishna is the source of all things. We don't meditate on ourselves. But Krishna can meditate on himself. He thinks he's the most beautiful thing he ever saw. He says he's the personal, self-centered, the ideal self-centered person, right? This does not mean, however, that we should also sit down and meditate on ourselves, as Bhaktivedanta was saying. We have to meditate upon Krishna, Radha Krishna. That is real meditation. Krishna is Krishna himself. God is God. Nothing else is God. Your feelings are not God. You are not God. Your girlfriend's not God. The boy is not God. Your job that you're going to get is not God. All these things that we in our mind think that are God are the sense are going to bring us the ultimate happiness in life. Krishna is Krishna himself. God is God. That's it. Therefore, he was teaching us that Brahma Muhurta should be utilized for meditation on Radha Krishna. By doing so, Krishna would feel very much satisfied. And similarly, we will also feel transcendently pleased and satisfied if we utilize the Brahma Muhurta period to meditate on Radha and Krishna, and if we think how Sri Rukmini Devi and Krishna acted as ideal householders to teach the whole human society to rise early in the morning and immediately engage in Krishna consciousness. It's like, it's an ideal time because you get up in the morning, it's like you're still waking up from sleep. It's like it's a quiet time. You're setting the standards for the day, because once the day starts to creep in, the mode of passion starts to kick in. You have to go to work. You have to get up and you got to run around, cook food. You got to do this, go shopping, do that, go do that. And you can see that early in the morning, generally speaking, maybe not so much in the cities, but generally, if you have like a place of civilization, the morning is a very quiet time. And then as the day progresses, people are waking up and there's more mode of passion, more things happening. So morning is an ideal time to begin in Krishna consciousness, to bathe your consciousness in thinking of Krishna. There is no difference between meditating on the eternal forms of Radha Krishna and chanting the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna. As for Krishna's meditation, he had no alternative but to meditate on himself. The object of meditation is Brahman, Paramatma, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but Krishna himself is all three. So God realizations, right? We have the Brahman realization, which is the impersonal white light, all the living entities, all the material energy, the white light. Many times people have, if they take enough drugs, sometimes they experience this, or some animistic religions will experience this white light. This is the bright white light, the effulgence coming off of God, is the lowest form of God realization, right? Then we have the Paramatma, which is the Lord in the heart, Holy Spirit, right? The Lord in the heart, the expansion of Krishna in our heart with us. Many yogis will have in the past sat down and meditated on their heart, focusing on the Paramatma. So when you're at the Paramatma, you can have a Brahman realization, but it's just still a partial realization because you don't realize Bhagavan, the supreme form. But when you get sort of like as you get to the top of a mountain, you can see all three, right? 3 tiers, the top, the middle, and the bottom. You can actually see that Krishna is the peak, Supreme Personality of Godhead, and from him comes the Paramatma and the Brahman effulgence. So these are the 3 forms of realization. Krishna himself is all 3. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan. The localized Paramatma is his plenary partial expansion, and the all-pervading Brahman effulgence is the personal rays of his transcendental body. Therefore, Krishna is always one, and for him, there is no differentiation. And this is kind of understood a little bit. If you dig enough, you can find that other world religions have this understanding that God is a person, although it's not quite as commonly understood because there's so much references, God being spirit, God being a burning bush, God being just this sort of voiceless, formless voice, But there's a couple of references. One is in the Old Testament where Moses goes to, I think it's Aaron and Sarah. They start complaining about the fact that Moses is always having this personal meeting with Jehovah, right? With the great Yahweh. And they felt like, well, we're qualified enough. And then, basically the voice comes from heaven to them and explains to them that because Moses is an unalloyed devotee of Yahweh, of Krishna, he's able to see me face to face. That's in the Old Testament. that he's able to actually see Krishna's form, whereas others who are still envious of Yahweh and of Moses, they are not able to have that realization yet because of their enviousness. In the Quran, or in the stories of the Quran, there's of course the great winged journey that Muhammad took on a donkey to Jerusalem, and from that point he actually went seven levels of heaven, and every level there was a different prophet, right? Jesus, and and of course he was being taken by Michael the archangel, and when he came to this dazzling white light, the Brahman effulgence, right? And Michael said, I am not purified enough to be able to see Allah, and you will have to go on. And so Muhammad, of course, having that relationship as a pure devotee, was able to go and see Allah face to face beyond the Brahman effulgence. So there are stories of this in different, but we can see it a lot here in the Vedic stories. So he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the localized Paramatma, and it is his plenary partial expansion in the all-pervading Brahman effulgence, is the personal rays of his transcendental body. Therefore, Krishna is always one, right? And for him, there is no differentiation. That is the difference between an ordinary living being and Krishna. For an ordinary living being, there are many distinctions. An ordinary living being is different from his body, and he is different from other species of living entities. A human being is different from other human beings and different from the animals. Even in his own body, there are different bodily limbs. We have our hands and legs, but our hands are different from our legs. The hand cannot act like the leg, nor the leg act like the hand. The eyes cannot hear like the ears, nor can the ears see like the eyes. All these differences are technically called svajtiya vijtiya. I think I'm pronouncing that right. The bodily limitation whereby one part of the body cannot act as another part is totally absent in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is no difference between his body and himself. He's completely spiritual, and therefore there is no material difference between his body and his soul. So it's a very important point, the difference between God and between the living entity. And this time, I've had this discussion with many Christians who just have this idea that they're going to go to heaven in their material form and have this relationship with all their family members, and their dog and their house is going to be there too, and everything like earth will be the same as it is in heaven. But they don't understand that it's not the material form that's going to the spiritual world or continuing on, but actually a spiritual form. We have a spiritual form, we're in a material body, but Krishna's form is non-different. It's not material, but it's non-different from himself, whereas we are different from our material body. That's the difference. And so I had to explain this to people because they're thinking that, okay, well, I'm going to go and my grandfather will be there. Well, how will he be there? Does he get to choose what age he's going to be? Is he going to be 5? Or is he going to be 50? Is he going to be 95 like he was when he died? I mean, how do you figure that? So that's the misunderstanding that they have on that point. Similarly, he is not different from his millions of incarnations and plenary expansions. Baladev is the first expansion of Krishna. From Baladev expand Shankarshan, Vasudeva, Prajuma, and Aniruddha. From Shankarshan, there is again an expansion of Narayan, and from Narayan, there's a second quadruple expansion of Shankarshan, Vasudeva, Prajuma, and Aniruddha. So there's these expansions of different Vishnu forms. So I know it's a little bit confusing because I know that we've come across some names like Aniruddha and Pradyumna as Krishna's children and grandchildren, but these are not the actual same expansions. These are just the names are similar. Similarly, there are innumerable expansions of Krishna, but all of them are one. Krishna has many incarnations such as Lord Nrsimha, Lord Boar, Lord Fish, Lord Tortoise. But there is no difference between Krishna's original two-handed form like that of a human being and these incarnations of gigantic animal forms. Nor is there any difference between the action of one part of his body and that of another. His hand can act as his legs, and his eyes can act as his ears. or his nose can act as another part of his body. Krishna's smelling and eating and hearing are all of the same. We limited living entities have to use a particular part of our body for a particular purpose, but there is no such distinction for Krishna. In the Brahma Samhita, it is said, Ajani Yashya Shakalendriya Vriti. He can perform the activities of one limb with any other limb. So by analytical study of Krishna and his person, it is concluded that he is a complete whole. As it said also in the invocation of the Sri Shapanishad, right? That the complete whole, and from the complete whole comes other complete whole, complete whole of the parts are complete in themselves. Krishna is that supreme complete whole. And all the things that emanate from Krishna are also complete in of themselves, in relation to the complete whole of Krishna. So that's a very understanding, if we can read the Sri, after I'm done with the Krishna book, I'm going to do the Sri Shapanishad, so we'll go into some of those videos about what that really means. So stay tuned for that. When he meditates, therefore, he meditates on himself. So self-meditation by ordinary man, designated in Sanskrit as soham, or I am that, right? Soham is simply imitation. This is our imitation, right? We were talking about. You can't imitate Krishna by saying, I am that. It's not, you don't say that. Aham Brahmasmi, I am spirit. That's okay. You can say that. I am spirit, non-different in quality as Krishna, not quantity. Krishna may meditate on himself because he is the complete whole, but we cannot imitate him and meditate on ourselves. Our body is a designation. So we can't meditate on our body because our body is temporary and it will fall apart. It's not an eternal. It's not infallible. It's not perfect. It doesn't have the perfections. It's not reliable as a perfect source. It's sort of the same kind of idea of utilizing our material mind and brain, the brain and the mind, to try to understand the complete. It's just a partial. It's not complete. It's fallible. It has so many problems, and is an ineffective way to basically understand the complete. Sort of like trying to put a little tiny pin dropper and suck, getting water and saying, I've not captured the ocean. It's like you really don't understand it all because your mind is so incomplete. So we're reading that. Krishna's body is also Krishna. There is no existence of anything foreign in Krishna. Whatever there is in Krishna is also Krishna. He is therefore the supreme, indestructible, complete existence, or the supreme truth. Krishna's existence is not relative existence. Everything else but Krishna is relative truth. But Krishna is a supreme, absolute truth. So the information, the Vedic scriptures, the words of the spiritual master that's handed down is also complete whole. It is non-different than Krishna. When we receive that kind of knowledge, when we receive that kind of information, when we relate to our spiritual master, when we are given instructions about hearing and chanting Krishna's names, those are complete wholes. They are non-different than Krishna. They are the supreme absolute truth. Our existence, however, is relative. So our truth is relative. Material truth is relative. It doesn't really, it's dependent on time and circumstance and person. For example, only when there is a light of the sun, the moon, or electricity are we able to see. Our seeing, therefore, is relative. And the light of the sun and moon and electricity is also relative. They are called illuminating only because we see them as such. Dependence and relativity do not exist in Krishna. His activities are not dependent on anyone else's appreciation, nor does he depend on anyone else's help. He is beyond the existence of limited time and space, and because he is transcendental to time and space, he cannot be covered by the illusion of Maya, or the material energy, right? His activities, whose activities are limited. In the Vedic literature, we find that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has multi-potencies. Since all such potencies are emanations from him, there is no difference between him and his potencies. Certain philosophers say, however, that when Krishna comes, he accepts a material body. But even if it is accepted that when he comes to the material world, he accepts the material body, it should be concluded also that because the material energy is non-different from him, this body does not act materially. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said, therefore, that he appears by his own internal potency, Atma Maya. So he can enter into his material energy, which is an expansion of it, or an expansion of him. It's his potency. He can enter into his own potency and not be affected by it. 35 minutes. Okay. Krishna is called the Supreme Brahman because he is the cause of creation, the cause of maintenance, the cause of dissolution. Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, and Lord Shiva are different expansions of these material qualities. All these material qualities can act upon the conditioned souls, but there is no such action and reaction upon Krishna because these qualities are all simultaneously one and different from him. Krishna himself is simply Satchitananda Vigraha, the eternal form of bliss and knowledge, and because of his inconceivable greatness, he is called the Supreme Brahman. Para-Brahman, right? His meditation on Brahman or Paramatma or Bhagavan is on himself only and not on anything else beyond himself. This meditation cannot be imitated by the ordinary living entity. So here it is laid out by Bhaktivedanta, laid out in the Srimad Bhagavatam that no one can meditate upon themselves as the Supreme Personality of Godhead because they are just partial. They are not the complete whole. After his meditation, the Lord would regularly bathe early in the morning with clear, sanctified water. Then he would change into fresh clothing, cover himself with a wrapper, and then engage himself in his daily religious functions. Out of his many religious duties, the first was to offer oblations into the sacrificial fire and silently chant the Gayatri mantra. Lord Krishna, as the ideal householder, executed all the religious functions of a householder without deviation. When the sunrise became visible, the Lord would offer specific prayers to the sun god. The sun god and other demigods mentioned in the Vedic scriptures are described as different limbs of the body of Lord Krishna. And it is the duty of the householder to offer respects to the demigods and great sages, as well as the forefathers. As it is said in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord has no specific duty to perform in this world, yet he acts just like an ordinary man living an ideal life within this material world. In accordance with Vedic ritualistic principles, the Lord would offer respects to the demigods. The regulative principles by which the demigods and forefathers are worshipped is called tarpana, which means pleasing. One's forefathers might have to take a body on another planet, but by performance of this tarpana system, they become very happy wherever they may be. It is the duty of the householder to make his family members happy, and by following this tarpana system, he can make his forefathers happy also. As the perfect exemplary householder, Lord Sri Krishna followed this tarpana system and offered respectful obeisances to the elderly superior members of his family. His next duty was to give cows in charity to the Brahmanas. Lord Krishna used to give as many as 13,084 cows. Each of them was decorated with a silken cover and pearl necklace. The horns were covered with gold plating, and the hooves were silver-plated. All of them were full of milk due to having their firstborn calves with them, and they were very tame and peaceful. When the cows were given in charity to the Brahmanas also were given nice silken garments, and each was given a deer skin and sufficient quantity of sesame grains. The Lord is generally known as Go Brahman Hitaya Cha, which means that his first duty was to see to the welfare of the cows and the Brahmanas. Thus, he used to give cows in charity to the Brahmanas with opulent decorations and paraphernalia. Then, wishing for the welfare of all living entities, he would touch auspicious articles such as milk, fire, honey, ghee, clarified butter, gold, jewels, and fire. Although the Lord is by nature very beautiful due to the perfect figure of his transcendental body, still he would dress himself in yellow-colored garments and put on his necklace of Kaustuba jewels. He would wear flower garlands, smear his body with the pulp of sandalwood, and decorate himself with other similar cosmetics and ornaments. It is said that the ornaments themselves became beautiful upon being placed on the transcendental body of the Lord. After decorating himself in this way, the Lord would then look at the marble statues of the cow and calf and visit the temples of God or demigods like Lord Shiva. There were many Brahmanas who would come daily to see the Supreme Lord before taking their breakfast. They were anxious to see him, and he welcomed them. His next duty, let's see, pretty long. That's long. Let's keep going. His next duty was to please all kinds of men belonging to the different castes, both in the city and within the palace compound. He made them happy by fulfilling their different desires, and when the Lord saw them happy, he also became very much pleased. The flower garlands, betel nuts, sandalwood pulp, and other fragrant cosmetic articles which were offered to the Lord would be distributed by him, first to the Brahmanas and elderly members of the family, then to the queens, then to the ministers, and if there was still some balance, he would utilize it for his own personal use. By the time the Lord finished all these daily duties and activities, his charioteer Daruka would come with his wonderful chariot to stand before the Lord with folded hands, intimating that the chariot was ready, and the Lord would come out of the palace to travel. Then the Lord, accompanied by Uddhava and Satyaki, would ride on the chariot just as the sun god rides on his chariot in the morning, appearing with his blazing rays on the surface of the world. When the Lord was about to leave his palaces, all the queens would look at him with feminine gestures. The Lord would respond to their greetings with smiles, attracting their hearts so much so that they would feel intense separation from the Lord. Then the Lord would go to the assembly house known as Sudharma. It may be remembered that the Sudharma assembly house was taken away from the heavenly planet and was re-established in the city of Dwarka. The specific significance of the assembly house was that anyone who entered it would be freed from the 6 kinds of material pangs, namely hunger, thirst, lamentation, illusion, old age, and death. These are the webs of material existence, and as long as one remained in that assembly house of Sudharma, he would not be infected by these 6 material webs. The Lord would say goodbye in all the 16,000 palaces, and again he would become one and enter the Sudharma assembly house in procession with other members of the Yadu dynasty. After entering the assembly house, he used to sit on the exalted royal throne and would be seen to emanate glaring rays of transcendental effulgence. In the midst of all the great heroes of the Yadu dynasty, Krishna resembled the full moon in the sky, surrounded by multi-luminaries. In the assembly house, there were professional jokers, dancers, musicians, and ballet girls, and as soon as the Lord sat on his throne, they would begin their respective functions in order to please the Lord and put him in a happy mood. First of all, the jokers would talk in such a way that the Lord and his associates would enjoy their humor, which would refresh the morning mood. The dramatic actor would then play their parts, and the dancing ballet girls would separately display their artistic movements. All these functions would be accompanied by the beating of mridanga drums and the sounds of the veena and flutes and bells, followed by the sound of the pakvaj, another type of drum. Along with these musical vibrations, the auspicious sounds of the concha would also be added. The professional singers called Shutas and Magadas would sing, and others would perform their dancing art. In this way, as devotees, they would offer respectful prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sometimes the learned Brahmanas present in that assembly would chant Vedic hymns and explain them to the audience to their best knowledge, and sometimes some of them would recite old historical accounts of the activities of prominent kings. The Lord, accompanied by his associates, would be very much pleased to hear them. Once upon a time, a person arrived in the gateway of the assembly house who was unknown to all the members of the assembly, and with permission of Lord Krishna, he was admitted into the assembly by the doorkeeper. The doorkeeper was ordered to present him before the Lord. And the man appeared and offered his respectful obeisances unto the Lord with folded hands. It happened that when King Jartsandha conquered all other kingdoms, many kings did not bow their heads before Jartsandha, and as a result of all of them, numbering 20,000, were arrested and made his prisoner. The man who was brought before Lord Krishna by the doorkeeper was a representative messenger from all these imprisoned kings. Being duly presented before the Lord, the man began to explain the actual situation as follows. And this is going into another story, which is going to be really exciting. And then they're going to eventually go over to Yudhishthira and the Pandavas. So I'm just going to stop right there, and we will wrap it up and continue the story next time. I know it's really exciting, but it goes on and it goes right into another story. So I'm just going to leave it there, and we'll just chat right now. Haribol. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasudeva Govardhana Vrinda Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasudeva Govardhana Sorry, I have to go. I know that was short, but we'll continue on to our next time. Thank you very much. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Namaste.